Alrighty, now we're ready to go with the items and then just rifle through the rest of this patch. Tear the Goddess, I touched on it earlier, how it now refunds a little bit of mana spent, kind of has a different interaction. Lost the mana regen, but this is far more helpful. Someone like Cassio casts her E, kills something, gets 100% of that mana back, but never really gains any mana if you're just getting back the mana you spent, unless you have a tier, because you get that mana back for spending the spell, and then you get 15% of that spell as well. Vel'Koz has that interaction on his queue. Basically, any champion that gets some type of refund on their spells will get further refund from the tier and possibly get back more mana than they spent in certain situations. Catalyst of the Protector, RIP. It got renamed. I refuse to use their new name. Costs 100 less, and rather than giving you effects on a level up, it actually gives you effects that help you both in and out of lane phase. You're not going to be trying to cheese the level up to get the regen in the middle of a fight, wait till the level up to get the regen to be able to stay in lane. What it does now is 15% of the mana, or 15% of the damage taken is gained as mana. So taking damage is how you get mana back with it. Spending mana restores 20% of the mana spent as health, up to 15 per cast. So if you cast something that costs 100 mana, with this item, it goes up once you upgrade it, but with this item you could only get up to a maximum of 15. And toggle spells, say leaving Singed Poison on, for example, will heal you up to 15 per second, and that goes up once it gets upgraded again. Pretty interesting. I was testing it around, playing with it a little bit. I found that it was really nice. However, being able to use that extra mana to stay in the fight and get the extra healing all sounds great, but you're just taking more damage and not being able to stay in the fight as long, getting this early in a lot of situations because you just don't have the tankiness. The heal is far less effective if you lose the health faster because they do more damage to you, so on and so forth. So I don't know. I'll still have to find a way to work it in. I think it would be good in certain situations. But you got to be careful trying to build it in lane for that super huge efficiency, because you could end up just losing a fight harder because you think you're getting more benefit from this, but you actually would have just got more benefit from a little bit of just raw survivability in a form of armor or magic resistance. Chalice of Harmony, 100 less, no longer restores 2% of missing mana every 5 seconds, but it grants 100% base health regen per 5. If your current health percentage is lower than your current mana percentage, keep in mind that's percentage, not actual numbers. On the flip end, if your health is higher than your mana, it grants 100% base mana regen. So it kind of tries to balance out your stats. I was kind of thinking of some interesting builds with this combined with like a catalyst possibly, or other interactions with these new items. But I think like if you're going that far and you're spending 2,000 gold on it when you could have just had like almost a full item at that point, it might not be worth it, but we'll see. There might be some interesting and unique situations with it. Lost Chapter, I actually really like this item. Building the Forbidden Idol as part of your Morellonomicon and whatever else didn't feel that great. Whereas the Lost Chapter incorporates what the Catalyst used to do as far as mana and gives you mana back on level up over 3 seconds. So this gives you mana to stay in lane. If you're spamming spells and staying in lane long enough to get these spells, then you're able to use the spells, clear the minion wave, get a level up, and then get more mana back to kind of stay in lane more perpetually. It also builds out of an Amp Tomb and a Sapphire Crystal and some gold, rather than just all mana regen, no damage. The trade-off is it doesn't give the cooldown reduction. Still builds in the Morellonomicon. You'll see that later. Fiendish Codex is kind of builds in everything now. It's kind of like the new Blasting Wand, except it gives it still gives cooldown reduction. Gives 30 AP up from 25, but the mana cost, or sorry, not the mana cost. The gold cost went up 100. Fiendish builds into a lot of things now. Will of the Ancients is removed from the game. Rod of Ages, first of the Catalyst items, costs 400 less. However, it has 20 less base AP, 100 less base mana, and a fully stacked rod is going to be giving you 300 less from the stack, so the overall mana less from the rod is going to be 400. On some champions, that's devastating. On some champions, you didn't really need that much mana, so you'll have to see where that ends up on whatever you're building it on. 15% of the damage taken from champions is gained as mana. But in this one, now that it's upgraded, like I was saying earlier, spending mana restores 25% of the mana spent as health up to 20 per cast, or sorry, 25 per cast, and toggle spells heal for 25 per second. So you can get some interesting interactions here, like on Singe, leaving your poison on is going to be healing you for 25% of the mana spent every tick. You're going to get a lot of HP 5 for that, basically. Also, one thing that I'm not too sure about, I didn't look into. It'd be interesting to know 15% of the damage taken from champions is gained as mana. Is that pre-mitigation or post-mitigation damage? And that'll actually make a pretty noticeable difference. And I'm assuming it's post-mitigation, but we'll have to see. Numerel and Amocon, 500 gold more. Like I said, it builds a lost chapter in a Fiendish Codex instead of the Forbidden Idol. Gives you 20 more ability power for that 500 gold, which is it's comparable to an Amp Tomb. Little bit more though. It gives you 400 mana now. It doesn't give you mana regen anymore, but it gives you the old Athene's passive, which is kills and assists restore 20% of your maximum mana. The cooldown reduction on it is unique, so people won't be stacking Morellonomicons anymore. And the Grievous Wounds is now on enemies below 35% health, so a little bit lower. You have to get them from the 40 that it used to be. Grievous Wounds duration is actually 8 seconds now, more over 5, so it lasts a lot longer. You don't have to reapply it as much. And as we'll find out later on in the patch, Grievous Wounds is actually not as useless feeling anymore. It's actually like pretty strong feeling, but we'll get into that. Athene's costs a lot less. Chalice of Harmony, Phoenix Codex. Mana regen is down a little bit. You no longer get that mana passive anymore because they moved it to the Morello up there, like I said. And the unique passes, 20%. See, it specifically states it here, which is why I think the catalyst items are post mitigation damage on their calculation, but 20% pre-mitigation damage that you deal to champions is gained as blood charges. 20% of pre-mitigation damage. If you're a support with no magic pen and AP, your base damage is still going to be quite a lot to actually be stacking up this pre-mitigation damage. But anyway, it stacks as blood charges up to a cap of 100 to 250, depending on your level. Healing or shielding an ally consumes those current blood charges to heal that ally, and I'm assuming for a 1-to-1 ratio off of what you put into it. So for supports that want to go in and do some damage, and then shield their dudes, they can actually get heals now. Like Karma can heal people by shielding. Janna can heal people by shielding if they use this item effectively, which is kind of cool. Grants 100% base health regen per 5 based on missing mana, etc. Like I said before with the Chalice. So it's no longer. This isn't going to be built by laners in very many situations, solo laners. It looks like more of a support item. It's geared down towards support, lower AP but lower cost, and supporty-ish features. But I mean, you might see still solo lane Lulu, solo lane Karma type thing build this. But people who used to build it maybe that just built it for the defense, the magic resist in lane and everything. They changed around a lot of the stats, so it might not meet those needs anymore. But they made it so that heal that you give to your allies is a pretty big thing, so a lot of more aggressive laners probably aren't going to be wanting that. Oh wow, I just looked over my recording program and thought it wasn't recording. I was about to be so sad. Mikhail's mana regen is actually up. No longer has the mana font thing because they changed the Chalice, but it gives you more mana base now because of that. Archangels no longer grants mana regen, but now refunds 25% of your mana you spent, in addition to granting the ability power. Mana Immune, kind of similar, grants 15% of mana spent, in addition to giving you that attack damage. The tier originally was 15, so the Archangels upgrading it early will actually be more efficient for keeping your mana in lane, even if you don't have the full stacks to make it transform yet. Abyssal Scepter, here's a bit of a change. 400 more. It's actually quite noticeably more expensive. Builds out of a Fiendish Codex and a Negatron Cloak rather than a Blasting Wand, and there's an Amp Tomb thrown in there. Ability power is actually down 10, but the magic resist is up 10, so it's 60-60. And it gives you 10% CDR. Magic resist reduction aura is no longer a flat 20, so getting it early is not going to feel as strong because you're not going to have it. It'll actually scale better into the game. You got to keep in mind it's giving you 60 ability power rushing this item on a lot of champions. Like I rushed one game Zonya's Abyssal on Rumble, and I think I had like I think it was a Haunting Guise, which doesn't give that much AP on its own either. You'll see later here, Zonya's AP is very low. This AP is kind of really low. I had like 150 AP, and I had invested, what's that one? I'd invested almost 7,000 gold, including that Phoenix, or probably over, including that Haunting Guise, and I had 150 AP on Rumble. I didn't realize that they lowered these APs so much. It gives you 10% CDR now, though, which is going to be helpful on certain champs and not as noticeable on other champs, and might be an item that just overcaps your CDR in combination with the Zonyas, which also gives you CDR now. You're going to have to take into account if you're running CDR runes, what your projected build path will be. Maybe switch out some of those CDR runes because you're going to be getting a lot of extra CDR from your items now. But that's something you'll get used to as you play on the patch. The aura no longer applies to minions. It'll no longer amplify your Sunfire damage to minions, etc. Or your just spell damage, obviously, basically. Zonya's Hourglass here. So it got toned down 600 gold. That is a lot cheaper, 600 gold. The price of that 600 gold, though, is that you lost 30 ability power, but you gained 10% cooldown reduction, so you gained a little bit as well. The build path is far more favorable to someone building it in pieces rather than having an awkward build path where you have to save up 1,250 gold to get a needless like you used to. Now you can just build it out of books. Books are becoming the AP longsword, where everything builds into something else. If you just buy like 800 longswords, if you ever looked at like a Renekton build or a Riven build, that if they get like a Hydra maybe and a Black Cleaver and something else like a Maw, look how many longswords you're building by the end of that game. If you're in the longsword making business in League, you're in a good spot. And now the Amp Tomb creators are going to be raking in the profits. Anyway, 30 less ability power. The stasis cooldown is actually 30 seconds more, so you got to be careful with that. But you do get it on a much earlier breakpoint with a 600 gold reduction. So, but like I said, it's more about getting it for what you need it for, rather than just stacking it because it gives you a lot of AP and also gives you that active. So you gotta watch out, because the active's only as useful as you are. If you're keeping yourself alive and do no damage because you've built all these defensive items and wasted all your gold on them, then you're not going to be that much of a factor. You'll still be a factor because you're not dead, but maybe if you got a death cap instead or just more damage, you wouldn't have had Zonyas because you just killed everything. Hextech Revolver. Spellvamp was removed from the game. Well, from the itemization. For the most part, and Hextech got just changed around. It's 150 less gold, still builds out of 2 Amp Tombs, and the new passive is damaging an enemy champion with a basic attack shocks them for 75 to 150. Combine this with Thunderlords, come into lane, hit someone with an ability, and then an ability and an auto attack. By the time you get this, you might be doing like 90 to 100-ish damage, plus your Thunderlords proc. All of a sudden, you've just chunked out 2 bars of health from them, just extra on top of your auto attack damage and ability power. It's caught me off guard quite a lot. And it's 40-second cooldown, shares cooldown with other Hextech items. There's a lot of new Hextech items here. Here is the new Catalyst item. We went over the rod already. This one builds out of a Catalyst, builds out of the Revolver. Gives you 300 health, 400 mana. Doesn't scale up like the Rod of Ages does. This one gives you 80 ability power. The fully stacked Rod will be giving you 100. It still gives you that mana health passive, but the unique active sprays off icy bolts that explode, dealing 100 to 200 base magic damage, depending on your level, plus a 0.35 ability power ratio right here. So say you have 400 AP to make it easy, and you're level 18. That's going to be doing an extra 340 damage. And that's AoE, so you can hit more than one person, and enemies are slowed by 65%, decaying over a half a second. So it's a noticeable slow, but it's not a lingering, like a long-lasting slow. 40-second cooldown, shares cooldown with other Hextech items. Here is another one. This one gives you cooldown reduction because it builds out of a Kindle Gem, health because it builds out of the Kindle Gem, and the Revolver. It is 60 ability power, 10% cooldown reduction. This one also has a unique active similar to the other one. You dash forward, but this time you unleash a Nova of Firebolts that deals 75 to 150, plus a 0.35 ratio. But enemies can be hit by multiple bolts, so if you aim it, they can take more damage, but you're only doing 20% additional damage per bolt. But you could still get extra damage off, and with the AP ratio, this item scales decently well. That's not a bad AP ratio for an item, for an extra spell, basically. 40-second cooldown as well. Gunblade, relatively unchanged. One of the important things to note here, unique active instantly deals 250 magic damage to target champion and slows them for 40% over 2 seconds. 40-second cooldown still. But it's no longer a gunshot. There's no travel time. It is a hit scan gun now. It just instantly does the damage to them. And it has a 0.3 AP ratio on that shot. Still does the same AD, AP, and Omnivamp, I think is what they called it. Basically, you heal for a percentage of your damage done. Alrighty, this is a pretty big change. A lot of people have been complaining about it, the fact that it's RNG. It is RNG which dragons are going to spawn and which dragons will be in your game. You cannot choose the order that they spawn. I think they should introduce a way to interact with how to, like, what order they spawn in, or at least a rotating pattern that you know what order they spawn in, so you can pick and choose your games and fights based on what your team comp is, rather than just being given what you're thrown. If you pick a team comp with a ton of damage and you don't get any of the fire drakes, feels bad, man. If you take a team comp that wants to siege all day and you don't get any water drakes, feels bad, man. Things like that. There's 4 different types of dragons. You can get them up until 35 minutes into the game. They spawn every 6 seconds, or 6 minutes still. So I think you can get 5. I don't know if you can get 6. I don't know. I'm not mathing right now. But that part is important because it says only 3 elements will appear per match. That doesn't mean 3 dragons, 3 like total dragons throughout the game. It means 3 elements. So if you have an earth dragon, a fire dragon, and an air dragon, you'll know that even if there's 2 more dragons or 3 or however many is going to be left, you won't have a chance of getting the ocean one. Only 3 can appear per game. You can get 3 of each dragon, and they will stack their buffs. And you will know which dragon is spawning next, as well as the first one to spawn in the game, based on the wall to the upper side of the dragon pit will have the symbol of that dragon. And when the dragon is actually up, the dragon symbol on the map, the monster face icon on your mini map, is no longer just a little minion monster. It is actually the type of dragon that it is. So there's a lot of clarity on that. A lot of people were confused in a lot of my games just because they haven't read the patch notes. It's something you'll get used to very quickly. The clarity on it's not bad. It's just the RNG factor that people aren't liking, I find. After 35 minutes, the Elder Dragon will spawn. I guess I should go back and tell you guys what the things do. The Earth Dragon will give you why is it? There we go. The Earth Dragon gives you damage increased to epic monsters and turrets, 10, 20, 30% bonus true damage. That's the stacking. So if you only get 1 Earth Dragon, you get 10. If you get 3, you have to have had 3 in the game. You don't have the choice to get 3 of any dragon. You get what you're throwing, and that's that RNG factor. But 10, 20, 30, bonus true damage to epic monsters and turrets, so you push faster and you take Baron faster to push faster after you take the Baron faster. Can kind of see where that goes. All of the dragons as well, I'm pretty sure, unless they changed it, have different kind of attack patterns. About similar levels of strength, but a little bit different on how they fight you. The Infernal Dragon gives you 8, 16, and 24% increased attack damage and ability power. If you're a tanky clown top lane and you're not getting any ability power, obviously that percentage increase on nothing isn't very much for you. But it gives you percentage increase on your base attack damage, so every champion can benefit from that. Your carries will especially love the Fire Dragon, and if you're against a team that's a lot of damage and they're getting Fire Dragons, it's scary. Even if your team doesn't benefit the most from a dragon, you got to look at your enemy team. Are they going to benefit from it? All right, well, that's mine. You got to go mine syndrome. You got to take it away from them. You can't let them have it. Cloud Drake, aka Air Dragon, gives you bonus movement speed out of combat, so it lets you roam and rotate more. 15, 20, 15, 30, and 45 bonus movement speed. That's flat. You got to keep in mind that flat bonus movement speed will interact with percentage bonus movement speed increases and give you actually a lot more value than it's giving you looks like on paper. And the Ocean Drake, this is the one for like sieging and poking. It will regenerate 10% of your missing health and mana every 18, 12, and 6 seconds. If you have 3 Ocean Drakes, every 6 seconds you regenerate 10% of your missing health and mana. If you're getting sieged by like some super poke champs, you're gonna be there forever. And if you don't all in them, they're just gonna heal their health back. It's gonna be interesting to see. So early dragons actually feel a lot more impactful. These buffs last you the entirety of the game. They don't just last for like a certain duration. The Elder Dragon, however, is a certain duration. It's a lot shorter. After 35 minutes, an Elemental Dragon will no longer spawn. In their place, the Elder Dragons will spawn, and it's a 10-minute cooldown timer on the the Elder Dragon, sorry, rather than the 6 minutes that you're usually used to. The buff only lasts 2 minutes, so you have to wait 10 minutes to get a 2-minute buff. In comparison, Baron was 3 minutes. Now it's 3.5 minutes long. So this is almost half the time of Baron. It basically gives you a 5 dragon stack, though. Like you used to have to get 5. You have to get the 5th dragon after getting 4 dragons throughout the game and really amp up to that late game power spike, where most games were decided fighting over the 5th dragon than the actual getting the 5th dragon and using it. Gives you bonus true damage over a duration, kind of like the old one did. Gives you 45 true damage over 3 seconds. But it also gives you an additional 45 damage over 3 seconds for every elemental dragon you had before that. So you had 4 elemental dragons before that. Well, you're getting 45 times 4, so you're getting 180 plus the normal damage that the Elder Dragon would give you, so 225 true damage over 3 seconds. That is incredibly painful if that happens. Just as in if the enemy team has 4 dragons, you really want to deny them this Elder Dragon. But in this case, it's not like denying an enemy team 5 dragons when you have none, where you're trying to stop them from getting something and you really get nothing out of it. You would still get bonus from the dragon, just not maybe nearly as much because you didn't take care of the dragons earlier. There's no way to get elemental dragon stacks after the Elder Dragon spawns. So say you're in a situation where if you get the Elder Dragon, you have no bonus true damage, and if they get it, they have a ton. You're kind of screwed, and that ship has sailed for you. So kind of leaves you stuck. But I guess, I mean, if you lose a turret in the game, the turret's not going to revive itself later on in the game. So kind of like the dragon feeling, I guess. Also, while this buff is active, increases the strength of elemental dragon buffs by 50%. So say you had the fire dragon here. A lot of people like damage. 24% increased attack damage and ability power. Cool. You got an elder dragon, you get 50% more, so you get 12% of that. Now you have 36% increased AD and AP. Some mages getting upwards of 1,000 AP. Cool. Now you get an extra 360 AP. Temporarily, and 240 permanently when you don't have that Elder Dragon. The thing about the Elder Dragon, though, being 2 minutes long, it's very important to make use of it rather than just running away and farming or going back to buy. By the time you get back to make use of it, it's going to be like 30 seconds left on it, and the enemy team can maybe just hold back for a little bit there. Oh my, I was expecting to do this in 3 parts. I might have to do 4. Rip. Rift Herald, we'll talk about this, and then we'll end this segment, and then we'll rifle through, like I was planning on doing, the last little bit of here. Rift Herald spawns once per game. It no longer has the old Rift Herald buff, so you don't have to worry about those kind of mini super Baron minions. But what it does do is it spawns at 6 minutes. It's harder to kill. Oh, sorry, I'm going to mention with the Elder Dragon. The Elder Dragon, really strong. It does not die fast. I think it spawns with like 13k health, does a ton of damage. Like, it takes about as long as a Baron to get. So it's not like you can just kind of sneak the dragon or whatnot. It's like, it's a pretty big investment to try and take it. All right. Spawn time on the Rift Herald spawns at 6 minutes rather than 4. At 6 minutes, it's still going to be hard to do it unless you have characters that are decent at doing it. It doesn't respawn again once in the game. Starts with 8,000 health rather than 5,000. Has 20 more armor as well. Has 30 more magic resistance. Its base attack damage is 10 higher. And the backstab damage, you can still do true damage from hitting it from behind, is 12% now instead of 15. Takes longer to kill, but the buff that it gives you, haha, no longer 2-minute buff. It gives you a 20-minute buff that lasts through death. You get this buff at 19 minutes. You will have it until 39 minutes in the game. While that sounds pretty broken, it is in certain situations. You have to be alone to be able to make use of it. While no allied champions are near you, you gain 5% damage reduction against champions and continuously build charges of corruption. So you take 5% less damage from champions, not turrets or anything, but this will very much help you in skirmishes. And here's the big part. At 100 charges of corruption, your next basic attack discharges all stacks of corruption, dealing 15 to 270 magic damage based on your level. And halved for ranged champions. It feels better on a melee champion. But for the next 20 minutes, every so often, the corruption stacks just build. It's kind of like a dead man's or a shiv that build from moving, but you don't have to move. They just build on their own. And then once you have full stacks, it discharges them. And you start building again. You don't have the option to not use them when it's fully stacked up. It does that damage to turrets, it does that damage to champions, it does that damage to minions, but it'll make you very scary. Once again, though, it only affects you if and gives you that buff if there's no allies near. So it's more of like a split pushing or like dueling type buff. It's not going to help you for team being with your team. I mean, you could be pushing with it and then teleport into your team using this as pressure to push towers, but once you get there, it'll disable itself. Also, Baron does not overlap this buff, so you can have this and Baron at the same time. And we'll go to the next part of the video here. I realize we're still on kind of epic monsters here, but I don't want to have this video be eagerly longer than all the others, so we'll get into the Baron in the last part here.